Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our initiative for storage bid cost recovery and default energy bid enhancements. This will be the initial workshop to this initiative. As well, we have posted related information and presentation materials to our CAISO.com stakeholder initiatives, and then you go click on Policy Initiative Center, and then you'll see all these two presentations posted here. The next slide are reminders of this call is being recorded for informational and convenience purposes only. Any related transcriptions should not be reprinted without the ISO's permission. If you do experience any technical issues during the call, feel free to send a chat to myself or event producer Silas. We'll be monitoring the chat as we go with this meeting. You're welcome to submit questions through chat and also through the verbal queue here by raising your hand located on the top of your chat window if you're using WebEx. And if those who are logged in through the audio line, I did see a few, please press *3. This will allow us to have you added to our queue. As a reminder, please make sure to state your full name and affiliation before speaking. We definitely want to make sure and address the questions to the right, in the right way to the organization that's speaking, so that way other folks who are online can hear them. But also, everyone has the ability to see attendees, so we won't be sending attendance out at all this time. And then we also have an upcoming agenda for today. We will kick things off with Sergio, who will be going over the background on storage BCR and DEB enhancements. And just a reminder, do want to make sure that everyone knows Sergio is our current storage sector manager, and he's also leading this initiative. As well, we do have on our panelist group right now, Amelia, who won't be speaking, but I just want to give everyone a heads up. She's our principal economist for the director of market, and she's here to also just stand by. And then also we will have a discussion presentation from Adam Sodley. He is our manager for market and policy analysis. So those are the three presenters we have on panelist group. We do have some few ISO folks joining us, and I do see a question. We'll get to you shortly, Mike. And then other than that, I just want to give a quick overview at the stakeholder process where we're at. Right now, we're standing before the STAR proposal, so we are at a workshop today. The next meeting, we are planning to post the STAR proposal with that meeting. We'll go over those timelines and deadlines on how things are working out, and we definitely encourage any stakeholder feedback. If we can go ahead and take Mike's quick question, in terms of maybe if you have any question prior to beginning, want to make sure you have any question. Go ahead, Silas, you can unmute Mike, and please be sure to introduce your organization title.
Mike, your line is unmuted. You can go ahead.
Okay, we'll get back to him. I don't think he has a question, so we'll.
Sorry, no, I don't have a question. Sorry, somehow I got in the queue by mistake.
Okay,
no problem, Mike. All right, thank you. Okay, so other than that, let's go ahead and we'll have Sergio introduce Sergio. I did see him on video, so we'll give him a quick second to get that started, and then he will be presenting on the next few slides. And you, Sergio, you have the floor. You should be able to move your slides. Go ahead.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Brenda, and good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to this new process, this new initiative on storage VCR and DEB enhancements. As Brenda noted, I will start by giving a little bit of background on the pertinence of this initiative at this time and on some of the challenges that we've identified that merit quite expeditious resolution. After that, I'll talk a little bit about the schedule that the scope and the schedule for this initiative. So I know that there will be plenty of questions as we move on. To the degree that we can hold them off to the end of each of the little sections, that would be very helpful. And yeah, thank you for joining today. So first off, I wanted to start with the motivation for this initiative. As I'm sure many of you are aware, several concerns have been raised regarding storage VCR in the past, and more recently, given recent changes relative to Order 831, the changes that allowed storage resources to bid above the soft energy bid cap in certain circumstances. So last year, we saw the Department of Market Monitoring publishing a report noting that there are situations, there are instances where battery energy storage may receive inefficient BCR, and noting that in the past, battery energy storage has received disproportionate amounts of BCR, considering how much of it has been installed. In their comments throughout the Order 831 process of bidding above the soft energy bid cap, DMM also highlighted once more that those changes could exacerbate the challenges that they've identified regarding BCR. This opinion, this perspective was also echoed by the Market Surveillance Committee, who recommended that ISO staff engage with stakeholders to review and restructure current BCR provisions for batteries, particularly given the changes around Order 831. And in the transmittal letter for those modifications to bid above the soft energy bid cap, the ISO did state that these concerns are important, and that we would be initiating a stakeholder process to consider enhancements to bid cost recovery as it applies to storage resources. So as you can see, the recent modifications are material to considering this topic, but this topic has actually been, in our radar for quite a bit. When the ISO filed the tariff amendments to prevent unwarranted BCR payments to storage, that is specific to the ancillary services state of charge constraint, the ISO did state that they would look to initiate a stakeholder process to discuss other long-term enhancements to BCR. Therefore, this initiative, we have several instances of commitment to engaging in this topic, and we know that today, given recent changes, is as timely as it will be. Furthermore, this is aligned with other recommendations to modify BCR rules for storage so that they would properly consider the attributes that are unique to these resources. In the order accepting that ASSOC constraint filing, FERC noted that while that instant proposal was just unreasonable, CAISO would continue to monitor the impacts of BCR provisions to electric storage resource settlements, and we would continue to engage with stakeholders to examine long-term enhancements that might be needed for the tariff to address this issue. So since about 4 years ago, this has been in the radar of DMM, ISO staff, and we have publicly committed to engage with this topic. And we know that there haven't been an awful lot of details on the matter due to its sensitive nature, but this is really the venue that we are seeking to address these issues. And as you can tell, given their sensitive nature, we will be seeking to do so quite quickly, as we'll discuss in some upcoming slides. So we are really committed to address these issues in an expeditious manner. Since we are well aware of the risk of unwarranted BCR payments for storage resources and their potential impact on the efficiency of the market as a whole. So at this point, I'd like to provide a bit of background on the issue at hand. First, to set the tone of the conversation a bit, it would be useful to talk about what bid cost recovery is and what it's really the goal of bid cost recovery within the market. So bid cost recovery is a settlement process that allows eligible resources to recover their bid costs. Bid costs are defined within the tariff, as you can see in the list here: startup, minimum load, energy bid cost, transition bid cost, pump shutdown costs, pumping costs, AS bid costs, and rock availability payments. Overall, BCR, as many other elements of the CAISO tariff and of the market, was initially designed with a thinking of conventional assets, conventional thermal resources. When BCR was initially developed, it was quite easier to think of the grid mix as containing conventional thermal assets and all other assets. So this was something that was not developed in a manner or aligned with potential new technologies that could be integrated into the CAISO market en masse, particularly as storage has been in recent years, where we've seen a very drastic increase. So as was noted by the ISO in the ASSOC filing that I referenced before and recognized by FERC, BCR, its goal is to provide uplift payments to a resource when revenues from the sale of energy and AS do not cover the resource's startup, minimum load, and energy bid costs over the course of 1 day. The goal here is to eliminate a potential incentive that resources would have to add a risk premium to their offers, thus, driving up their bids, leading to higher overall costs for energy, and leading overall to inefficient market outcomes. So BCR seeks to eliminate that incentive of adding a risk premium so that resources, can bid at whatever is closest to their marginal cost, and we can ensure efficient outcomes through the market. In the order accepting this ASOC filing that I referenced before, FERC acknowledged that overall storage resources do not have the conventional drivers of BCR, meaning storage resources do not have startup costs, nor do they have minimum load costs. And because they also have, in general, quite fast ramp rates, these resources do lack the conventional drivers for BCR. While this is true, they may have other opportunity costs. So that is something that has been included, was included in our ASOC filing, and FERC acknowledged in the order ultimately accepting that filing. Now, despite the fact that BCR, was not developed with storage in mind, and that storage overall lacks the traditional or conventional drivers for it, we have seen significant BCR payments to storage resources. And importantly, some of those have materialized despite not being fully aligned with the intent of BCR. That is the intent that we covered in the prior slide, which would be to eliminate the need to include that risk premium in their bids throughout the market run. So what we have seen particularly is that there is an issue specifically related to the buy and sell back of day-ahead schedules. So today, storage assets, the majority of them, it's my understanding that are RA assets as well, and they would submit, their day-ahead schedule because they need to submit their day-ahead bids, and they would get a schedule. A buyback or a sellback occurs when that schedule cannot be supported in real time given the state of charge of that resource. So when we talk about a buyback, that means it's a buyback of a discharge day-ahead schedule that occurs because the state of charge of the resource in real time is too low to support that discharge day-ahead schedule. A sellback is the same situation, but for the charge side of it, where day-ahead schedule to charge cannot be supported because the state of charge is too high for it to be supported. Now, as you can tell by reading these two sub-bullets, this creates a complex dynamic. This creates a dynamic where incentives might not be aligned with the intent of BCR, because assets would have an incentive now to operate in the real-time market in a manner that would trigger buy or sellbacks for their day-ahead energy schedules, so as to capture outsized BCR payments. This is an area where I'd like you to think a bit about the challenges that this creates, not only in terms of the incentives that each individual asset faces, but also the challenges, the operational challenges, the reliability challenges that this would create, right? This has definitely implications for operations and for reliability if we have a set of incentives that makes it so that assets would desire to trigger this buy or sellbacks, right? That they would bid in a manner consistent to get that on a routine basis. Now, we understand that this is a complex issue, and we understand that this is an issue that is particular to energy storage resources. So because of that, we want to address it expeditiously, but we want to address it by collaborating and working with stakeholders to understand how BCR should work for storage resources and develop a robust set of provisions that actually recognize and take into consideration the unique characteristics of these resources. Knowing that this is a sensitive matter and that it could have significant implications on BCR currently and in the coming weeks as we continue our discussion here, the ISO is actively monitoring BCR impacts to ensure that BCR does not rise to an untenable level following the dissemination of this topic. And I do want to underscore that this is an important component, an important factor that we took into account when thinking about how to communicate the commencement of this initiative and the materials relative to this initiative. We understand that this has been done with a bit more, a bit quicker than others, and that is truly, aligned with the fact that this is a sensitive matter, and that we'd like to resolve it and advance on it, collaborating with stakeholders as well. So I think this would be a great time to stop if there's any hands raised or questions before we talk about the schedule. Yeah.
Let's go ahead and unmute Alva.
There. Okay, Alva, your line is unmuted.
Good morning or good afternoon, Sergio. Well presented from the CAISO's perspective, this issue. Although I really wish, in my mind, the default energy bid issue is really the horse that pulls the cart, not the BCR issue, because many of the assertions that are made in these background slides should not be the case if storage bids represent the costs for batteries to operate, which, by the way, include not just opportunity costs, but actual charging costs. And I think that's one thing that's missing in some of what you of what you described there. But do you think that if batteries had appropriate default energy bids, that it would be difficult to call BCR inefficient? Or would you suggest that CAISO is still not able to come to an efficient market solution in spite of the fact that it had the correct cost information about the batteries that it was dispatching?
Thank you for the question, Alva. I appreciate it. And I think that overall, if there were modifications to the default energy bid, that is also something we are planning to discuss within this initiative, just in at a later time. We would still find instances where we could describe some of the bid cost recovery as inefficient. And here I want to make clear that what I'm referring to when I say inefficient is generally, not aligned with the goal of BCR as stated in the tariff, as stated in our documents, prior filings to FERC on this matter, mainly that ASOC filing that I mentioned before. The dynamic described here in page 13 could be characterized as such, even with better, as inefficient, even with better approximations of the default energy bid, since really what is underscoring is that there is an incentive to act in a way that would make a specific schedule basically it can't be supported without any downside, right? There is no risk associated with that strategy. So yes, while devs could mitigate that, this would still be present even with an enhanced dev potential.
But you're suggesting that resources would bid to drive state of charge in ways that CAISO could not manage, even though they had visibility on the costs of the battery, and then not lose money or essentially create some predictable arbitrage between the losses that they would have to incur in the first period and the gains they would make in the latter period. Do you really think that's a predictable arbitrage?
I'm suggesting that the rules today can allow a circumstance like what is described in this slide to occur. Yes.
Well, it can. Certainly, something can happen. The question is, can it be made to happen systematically? Can a resource that's bidding its costs cause this to happen systematically? And in my mind, it's the CAISO's responsibility to co-optimize between the cost of the resource and its state of charge. That's the purpose of the NGR model. So if it has visibility on the state of charge, it should have the ability to come up with a least cost solution that doesn't allow for that later, that forced buyback later in the day.
Well, I understand that perspective. I would say that the bidding strategy does play a role here. And while we have, optimization, the optimization on our side, a bid strategy could be constructed to basically trigger this kind of buy or sell backs. Yes.
Well, you can trigger all kinds of things. The question is, could you make money off of it? I question that. Anyway, I'll look forward to the rest. I think again, I just think that the focus not being on the correct representation of battery costs means that you can very readily take this stance of saying we're going to disallow bid cost recovery, which, by the way, in terms of the other way of looking at this is bid cost recovery is something that has been in the past prior to ASSOC. It was only disallowed in cases where participants had complete control over their schedules. And therefore, they were considered to not actually be bidding in the market. The situations we're talking about are certainly not conditions in which batteries have full control over how they're being scheduled. They might be trying to exercise market power, and if so, they should be subject to some form of mitigation. But the idea that these kinds of exploits can be done in the same way that you can self-schedule seems very, very far-fetched to me. Thank you.
Thank you for the perspective, Alva, and we'll appreciate your having that perspective in the comments as well, so as to include it in the record of the proceeding overall of the initiative. Thank you.
The next person in the queue is Don Trethaway. Don, your line is unmuted. You can go ahead.
Hi, Don Trethaway for California Energy Storage Alliance. Sergio, so independent of how this state of charge is either too low to support, results in a buyback or a sellback, is the issue, regardless of who caused that, because it could be caused by the CAISO, it could be caused by market participants, I guess doing something that you guys are concerned about. But in order for this to work, are you saying that, let's say that I do have a day ahead schedule. I see going into the operating hour that my state of charge, there's no way that it's going to be able to support my energy schedule. So I bid negative $150 to sell energy, and it's obvious that I can't meet that schedule. And so I get BCR between negative 150 and my dispatch, which didn't occur. Is that what you're trying? Is that the concern?
The concern would be that entering into a specific hour where there was already a day ahead schedule, the asset does not have the state of charge to be able to support that. Let's assume that it is a discharge schedule. If you have a discharge schedule, that's unavailability, that the fact that you cannot support that award will basically trigger a BCR between the bid and the LMP as BCR is paid out. So, without going into the specifics of different numbers, that's really the mechanism overall.
Okay, so because I think it'd be good, because I was trying to find some of the real-time BCR rules, and in all honesty, it took me forever looking around trying to find it. And I think it would really be beneficial to actually, rather than making sort of these high-level statements, to actually show how the actual settlement works and highlight the concerns that you have numerically. I think that would be really beneficial in your next paper. And I think then because then we can understand the concern, and then we have the debate about what caused the real-time state of charge to put us in this position of a buyback or a sellback. Was it the result of CAISO modeling issues? Was it the result of not co-optimizing in real time ancillary services? Was it because of bidding behavior, and are there rules that need to be put around that? But just making these high-level statements, I don't think helps anybody in terms of trying to understand where the solution is, especially given the speed at which you plan to make these changes. I would note that bid cost recovery is not the simplest thing in the CAISO market. And the fact that CAISO committed to working on this stuff in 2022 and didn't do anything for 2 years, and now we're going to do this in 2 months, it seems a little inconsistent with comments made to FERC about taking this as a priority to just sort of sit on it. I mean, we could have been working on this in June, but we didn't. For some reason, we waited when we knew that it was an issue, supposedly with the changes we made on the storage bidding. So, like I said, I think a lot more information needs to get out in terms of what's actually going on here that you're concerned about, so we can actually address it.
Yes, thank you for the comment, Don. I would say overall, yes, we can, think about providing a more specific example. That's one part, and we'll consider that when in the development of our issue paper / straw proposal, as we'll talk about shortly. The second thing is that, yes, you are correct that this was a concern previously. Definitely recent changes relative to 831 had made the magnitude of this concern different. Now it's more timely to address at this time. And third, we'll talk a little bit about the schedule in the coming slides, but we do understand that, we are seeking to address this expeditiously, given its sensitive nature. We think that a schedule as the one we're putting forth will actually give stakeholders plenty more opportunity to give feedback and their perspective as opposed to our traditional schedule. So that's a strength we see in what we're putting forth. But happy to talk a little bit more about that when we get to the scope. Thank you. Any other questions?
The next question in the queue is from Mike Kremek. Your line is unmuted, Mike. You can go ahead.
Hi, this is Mike Kremek from Boston Energy Trading and Marketing. I just have a question. I wonder, so multiple times, we're a SE for multiple storage assets, and we experience uneconomic awards due to the multi-interval optimization, where we don't get big cost recovery, even though potentially we should. And I wonder are you planning to address the multi-interval optimization challenge that storage face, and potentially what could be driving some of the BCR you're seeing is the assets being scheduled uneconomically in the current interval for future projected pricing? I think that's an item that has been raised multiple times, but I didn't see that in your first couple slides.
Yeah, my apologies. Could you repeat your name and affiliation? I didn't catch that at the beginning, just to make sure.
Mike Kremek with Boston Energy Trading and Marketing.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mike. Well, this is the kind of clarification of the kind of topic that we'd like to understand also better the perspective of stakeholders throughout their comments in general. I would say that the instances that have made us consider taking on this topic quickly are not so much related to this concern, but we'd love to hear how that would play out in your comments. Thank you.
We do also have a question in the chat panel from Jarrett Fisher. Jarrett asks, apologies if this was already addressed, but can the CAISO provide any clarity as to why there is only a 3-day window for stakeholders to submit comments?
Yes, Jared, we had not talked about that, and I will in the next little section. So I'll address that shortly, but thank you for the question.
And one more question in the verbal queue from JK Wang. JK, your line is unmuted. You can go ahead.
So this is JK from PG&E. Just I have one quick question. So I understand that this is related to the earlier discussion of allow the storage to bid above the software offer cap. But also I understand this is a complicated issue that may relating to the modification of the current storage model as well, which we apparently defer it to the second phase of storage modeling enhancement. So I want to clarify with the CAISO whether the goal of this initiative is to develop an interim solution for this summer only, or this is something that's actually going to sustain for a longer time?
Yeah, that's a good question. The intent would be to develop a solution for the topics within the scope, within this initiative, particularly regarding BCR. That would be what we're calling track 1, BCR for storage resources, and we do see how there could be an interplay with if there is an additional, participation model developed in another initiative. But at this time, the goal is not just something that would be, let's say, in the interim for the BCR topic. I also would like to clarify that this has been probably, this has become more of a priority given the changes relative to Order 831, but this is not a challenge just related to or just associated with the changes of Order 831 of bidding above the soft offer cap. This has been a concern prior, but because of these changes, it's even more important to address it expeditiously. Yeah.
Okay, thank you so much. That's really helpful. And if we have slides later, or if we can have better clarification, what's the intended implementation timeline, that would be really helpful.
That is something that we'll share as soon as we can. Not during this presentation, however, but we'll share it when we're able to. Thank you.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay, we just had a hand go up from Chris Devon. Chris, your line is unmuted. You can go ahead. Chris, your line is unmuted. You should be able to go ahead.
Hi there. Can you hear me all right?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Thanks. I had the double mute on. Chris Devon, TerraGen. So just wanted to ask Sergio a little bit more about the kind of the way that's being described for the intent of BCR. Do you believe that CAISO has included in the scope of this, or the intent to include in the scope of this, discussions about this intent of BCR for storage as part of this, or is this more targeted to only this specific issue with the eligibility of BCR? Because I think there might be a need to actually talk more about the actual intent here of BCR for storage because of the uniqueness of the asset. I think you kind of touched on that, but I just wanted to see if you could clarify on that point.
Yes, and I went back to page 12 here. I would say that the intent of BCR under the CAISO tariff is well recorded in prior filings that we've done to FERC and FERC's orders accepting said filings. Because of that, kind of going over the intent and seeking to redefine it perhaps is a bit, at this time, in my perspective, outside of the scope of the initiative perhaps. But we would welcome that discussion in your comments as it informs your perspective on how VCR provisions should work for storage. So, I understand the perspective of maybe we need to have a bit more discussion and about this to begin with. And I would suggest that in order to have that, it would be great to see it within your comments so that that discussion can take place in our updates and our documents that we'll keep sharing so as to drive this initiative forward.
Okay, thanks, Sergio. Just to react to that a little bit, I would say I think at the very least you guys should really try to provide some more robust documentation of that intent and just explain how things have gone in the past for everyone, so we're all on the same page. And then, concur with the other prior statements from Elva and Don about the intent, and even the Boston Trading point about how the multi-interval optimization could drive some of this. I just think that because it is a unique asset and BCR has really been developed way prior to the idea of storage being involved in this part of the market and settlements, I think it would behoove us to do that and to slow down a little bit on this, recognizing the sensitivities with exposure to possible manipulation concerns and things. I think it's just a little bit concerning when you see CAISO talk about doing holistic storage initiatives and go through a lot of working groups in these price formation enhancements and other type of initiatives, and then move into something so quickly here that has significant ramifications on the financials for storage assets without doing something a little bit more holistic. So I do think the point about, should this be an interim solution or not, if CAISO is not going to address some of these things that are more wide ranging, we would certainly feel that it should be only an interim solution, perhaps, or a limited type of change until we could actually talk through some of those other more complex things, specifically the multi-interval optimization issue.
Yeah, thank you for that perspective, Chris. I really appreciate it. And, we do welcome some of that, discussion and your perspective, and we'll try to represent that, from your comments and include that in the discussion as we move forward. But I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
And Don Trethewey did enter the queue again. Don, your line is unmuted. You can go ahead.
Hi, Don Trethewey from CISA. Sergio, a couple times you've mentioned this, and DMN put it in their comments that this quote-unquote issue is more urgent because of the recent changes that we approved with regards to allowing storage to better reflect their actual cost by bidding above $1,000 during high-priced conditions. And I would argue the fact that we put that change in was one of the potential causes for the state of charge to be in the two situations that you raised before. And so in essence, that's actually reducing the instances where CAISO's unwillingness to allow storage to reflect the intraday opportunity cost in their energy bids was creating the SOC issues that you're concerned about with regards to BCR. So can you provide, and that's what I was trying to get with my original question, what is the exact problem and how is it structured with the two buyback scenarios you have, and understanding exactly how those are accomplished, so that we can understand, because is that the problem you're looking to fix? Is that the problem that is made worse from 831 because now you're allowing people to bid higher or the prices can go higher? Can you provide any additional context around that statement that the 831 made this issue, the changes we made these things worse?
Yeah, well, first off, I would say that some of the changes related to 831 are about enhancing or allowing storage to represent their costs in a more accurate way with the ability to bid above the soft offer cap. That wasn't really, I would say, a CAISO active decision not to allow that, but more so that the policy at the time, that policy that now has changed through our filing. The reason why those changes could exacerbate this concern is really because prices could now be higher, and also because the bid of the asset could also be higher. So for the sellback concern, the bid of the asset could be, it could exceed $1,000. So that would make so that the difference for a sellback could be greater. And for a buyback concern, the prevailing LMP could be higher as well, making so that the buyback as a whole is higher. So those are two instances in which the modifications relative to 831 makes this concern potentially, of a larger magnitude. I would also say that in your comments, you are implying that this modification relative to 831 could actually attenuate or mitigate some of this issue. because now we would have a better characterization of opportunity costs via higher bids, and thus this might not occur as frequently. I will not venture to say today with the data at hand if that is likely or not, or what proportion of the issue might be mitigated or minimized by that, since we are in the beginning stages of looking at this, at how 831 changes will play out. But regardless of that possibility, it is clear that with a higher LMP or a higher bid, each of the two sub-bullets here could be amplified in their magnitude. Yeah. Does that help, Don? Any other questions there?
I don't have any further questions.
Okay.
Okay, there are no further questions in the queue at this time.
Excellent. Well, let's talk a little bit about the schedule then. For those following offline, we're now going to be moving to slides 15 and onwards. The way that we have thought of this initiative is to split it into two tracks. The first track is what we're calling addressing unwarranted storage VCR, with the goal of refining VCR provisions for energy storage in standalone configurations. That is something that I sort of implied in my prior slides in the prior conversation, but this is really looking at energy storage in a standalone configuration. However, we have been made aware of other circumstances that are specific to co-located resources where revising or reviewing some of the VCR provisions is also important. That, in addition to default energy bid enhancements for the storage DEB and developing a DEB for hybrid resources, those three topics would be in track 2. So far we're thinking about working on this track sequentially. Track 1 would have quite an expedited timeline, basically because of the challenges of, discussing publicly the vulnerability that we've been talking about, the vulnerability of the market design, and trying to seek, an expedited resolution so as to minimize the chances for more and even higher untenable, unwarranted storage VCR. Track 2 would follow sequentially and would follow a much more regular initiative cadence relative to track 1. So in these slides, in the next couple of slides, we'll talk a little bit more about the timeline, the schedule for track 1. Just know that the schedule for track 2, at this time, we're thinking of it as sequential to track 1. If you have comments, feedback on that matter, we'll greatly welcome that through your comments. And speaking of that, this is the timeline, the expedited timeline for track 1. As Jared asked before, it would seem that there is only a 3-day period or window for stakeholders to submit comments. We actually wanted to clarify a couple of those points. So first off, the goal with the comments, the comment periods that we've included here, is really to provide stakeholders an opportunity to give us feedback on the materials that we will be sharing. In the case of this workshop would be the slides that we're sharing. In the case of the next meeting, it would be the straw proposal that would be shared by the 17th. So in that, from that point of view, the time between a posting and comments is a little bit closer to a week. which does allow for a bit more work, more work to take place. Our thought process is that we would use the meetings to, catch up people on what has changed relative in the most recent posting, the most recent documents or materials that were posted. Use that time to clarify any questions that there might be, and to provide, additional examples or have additional conversation if needed. But overall, we're thinking of using the comments as an ability, as an opportunity to react to the written materials that have been posted ahead of the meeting. So in that sense, I think that allows for two things. One, there'll be really a bit more time than just the 3 days that it might seem here between the call and the comments. And two, this allows us to get more constant feedback from stakeholders, particularly in a matter as complex that like this one is. So here we made this this judgment call in a way of having more opportunities for feedback from the community here, from everyone in the call, as opposed to fewer opportunities that are more spaced apart, and meetings that and postings that maybe have very material changes between one another. Here, we would still have the ability, to quickly incorporate your feedback and your perspective as we keep moving on the initiative, while also, having more than one or two opportunities for feedback. We actually would have, as you can see here, we have 5 opportunities for comments in our current timeline. 5 opportunities in the space of just over 2 months. So we understand that this is, a trade-off between having more time to prepare that feedback or having more chances for that feedback. And in this case, we think that because of the substance of the subject matter that we are discussing here, having more chances for feedback is actually of great benefit for both us and the stakeholder community. As you can see in this slide, slide 18, we are targeting having a final proposal by the end of August with comments early in September, and we're targeting the September board meeting, which would be the 26th. Something that is not included in these tables of slides 17 and 18 is that we will also seek to have a market surveillance committee meeting on this matter. We have not included it in this table at this time because we're still figuring out those details, but we find that the perspective of the market surveillance committee will be very, very useful, very important for us as we move through this process, since they're well aware of the challenges we're facing, and they've also, urged ISO staff to work on this issue. Let me check quickly. Yes, that is the last slide that I have on the timeline. I imagine there will be comments or questions here, so I'll pause for a moment.
Alva has his hand up in the queue again. Alva, your line is unmuted. You can go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you, Sergio. This is obviously a very aggressive timeline, and in my mind, it implies only one kind of solution feasible for CAISO, which is very disappointing, which is to essentially trigger periods in which batteries are not eligible for BCR and hence are completely unhedged against any price outcome in the market. We had previously suggested during the ASSOC initiative that at a minimum, batteries should be covered for their DEB costs in looking at potential losses during these periods, rather than simply the concept of which is simple for CAISO to implement, but can be quite injurious to market participants, of simply excluding periods from bid cost recovery that periods, that those periods would be flagged, but and participants might not necessarily recover their bid costs, but they would recover their default energy bid costs during those periods. And I have heard nothing and seen nothing in this about that being considered, but at that time, CAISO did state they would look at solutions like that rather than simply excluding these periods. So I think the timeline makes it very difficult to do that, but I wanted to bring that up again because I just think the concept of these triggers, which are already very, also batteries that provide regulation are very frequently subject to periods of being disallowed bid cost recovery. I think are really not, and again, these are periods that are not under the battery's direct control. And you can say batteries can make strategic decisions. Of course they can, but they're not controlling the outcome in the market in the way that disallowing BCR indicates. So I'd like that to be considered as part of this, which might take more time. But I just find the setting of triggers to disallow bid cost recovery is a very kind of punitive approach to dealing with batteries in the market. I do want to bring up one other point of which actually, to say that there's also a substantial risk in using the BCR flag approach versus something more like market power mitigation, which is that the bids that are submitted by resources that are subject to losing their bid cost recovery, those bids are still in the market. They're still used to set prices. They can still have effects on PG&E as a load serving entity, for example. So I don't see necessarily the effect you're talking about of mitigating the risk of high prices in the market. Indeed, I could see prices that are utterly unmotivated because essentially they're going to lead to rents that ISO then has to allocate because of the fact that those same bids will still be used to set prices in the market, and yet the resources themselves will not be receiving the revenues from those bids. I find that questionable as well. Finally, I wanted to ask whether, going back to sort of maybe Don's question, but if FERC 831 were not approved or were rolled back, would this problem still exist in this urgent way? Is it urgent now because you've revealed a strategy that you think people might use, and aren't there better solutions than putting forward these kinds of blanket solutions to preventing people from doing exploits that you yourselves are revealing to the world? I find this just a very strange approach ever since the ASSOC initiative of simply saying, this is something that can be done. We're going to tell you about it. Now we have to close down the market in some way that is really counter the objectives of the market. Sorry, I'm ranting here a bit, but those are my thoughts.
Yeah, no worries, Alva. I think it's normal to be processing all of this information in real time. So I see there were 3 comments there. Let's start with the first one related to the option to use the DEB as the means to settle the BCR, let's say, as opposed to the bid. I do recall that conversation as well, and this is, in this conversation, this meeting of today, we wanted to frame it a bit more as a workshop discussion where we can talk about the issue, talk about why we are pursuing this initiative, why we are pursuing it in this time frame, and what are the different concerns and perspectives of the stakeholder community. So we are not yet, at least for today's conversation, in the solutions discussion space. So I definitely appreciate you bringing this up, and we would appreciate seeing that reaction in your comments as well, as it will inform the solution crafting later on. But we didn't want to, in this initial conversation, like preempt or determine what will be the only paths to be discussed or something like that. Then I'll go to your third one because your second comment was a little bit confusing to me. I might have some questions, but your third point was about if the ISO hadn't finalized the changes relative to 831, would this still be as urgent as it seemingly is given the schedule of this initiative? Although I would want to avoid talking about such counterfactuals, I would say that yes, this would still be something that the ISO would try to resolve quickly and in the near future, given prior commitments publicly to the board and to FERC and to other stakeholders that have submitted comments on the matter. So this would still be, of great importance from our perspective. The changes relative to 831 just make it so that we would definitely want to address this since now there are other impacts because of the ability of these assets to bid above $1,000 that need to be considered in the context of buybacks and sellbacks, as we've seen. And why we might want to share this information, this vulnerability in the market design and try to solve it with stakeholders is really so that we can craft a robust solution that is durable and that has considered the different points of view and the different challenges that this issue presents. That being said, we are well aware of its potential impact in the market, and that's why we are clearly tracking and monitoring BCR payments so that the information that has been shared today is not used in a manner that creates more of these unwarranted BCR payments. Regarding your second point, I did have a quick question. It seems to me that there may have been a bit of a misunderstanding there. I was not trying to convey that it's exclusively because of these changes in 831 that this particular strategy could be, let's say, pursued. It's only that in some cases, a bit above 1,000 could make it even more pressing. But hopefully these responses get to your comments.
Yeah, my second point was really, or I don't know, it was my second or third, was just saying that these solutions do not actually change the underlying bids that are used in the market. They're changing the cost recovery after the market. Even setting the flag to say that a resource will not receive bid cost recovery does not, as far as I know, change the bids in, for example, in the ASSOC implementation. And so if now that you're potentially going to extend this approach of disallowing VCR to large energy bids, those bids are still in the market. Those are still what is used to clear the market. And I'm suggesting those solutions are obviously inefficient if what's going to happen is your plan is going to be to flag a large number of those bids as being ineligible for bid cost recovery, and hence they're not going to receive the price that they post. So there's another strategy which comes after the strategy you've just described, which is batteries that know they're going to lose bid cost recovery can bid whatever they want in order to have whatever effect they want to have in the market, because it's not going to have any effect on their revenues. And I'm exaggerating, of course, but I think that this is another risk with this kind of approach of, again, I think the proper approach is one in which the bids themselves are mitigated and the market is actually corrected to run efficiently. If your concern is efficiency, then the market should be running efficiently, not the post-market settlement process. That was my point. If that makes sense.
Yeah. No, it makes sense, and I understand it more clearly now, and thank you for that. And these are exactly the kind of perspectives and concerns that we want to discuss throughout this process, as opposed to, do something more akin to an instant filing, et cetera. That's why we're sharing this, opening this initiative, and we're trying to provide for as much feedback, as many feedback opportunities as we can within this compressed timeline.
We appreciate that.
So I appreciate that perspective, Alba. Thank you.
Okay, there aren't any further questions in the queue at this time.
Maybe let's give folks a minute, because I'm a little bit surprised that there aren't any others.
Yeah, just as a reminder for attendees, if you'd like to enter the queue, you can press the raise hand icon. It is located at the bottom of your participants panel. Okay, Chris Devon just entered the queue. Chris, your line is unmuted. You can go ahead.
There, Chris Devon from Terragen again. Can you hear me all right?
Yes.
Yeah, thanks, Sergio. So, I guess you just talked a little about track 1 timeline, but I did, see some of the stuff on the hybrid resources being in here. And do you guys have a specific time frame for track 2 yet envisioned?
Yeah, great question. We are thinking of working on track 2 sequentially, after track 1, but we also welcome feedback on the scope and this is such a hard word in English for me, sorry. Prioritization of the topics. So while we're not putting forth right now specific schedule for track 2, you can imagine that it would start, after track 1, so September, October-ish, and it is there are more topics there, so it might run a bit longer. So knowing what your priorities would look like would be very helpful in your comments. Additionally, if there are any comments as to why we might not want to do this sequentially, if there are interplays that are important, thinking about that through your comments would also be of great help. Yeah.
Okay, thanks for that. I will just say, initially, a verbal reaction to that is that, I think we should really not go so fast on this track 2 piece, specifically related to the DEBs, and particularly on the hybrid resources DEB. I think even the storage, standalone storage DEB itself is a highly complicated topic, and the MSC opinion on the initial formulation of it highlighted the need for improvements, even when they were supporting applying it. I think it would really behoove us to take our time and make sure we get that one right. So hopefully we can slow things down here on these discussions related to that. But obviously, I don't want us to hinder the implementation of things, especially if we're going to try to make some changes to the BCR provisions in track 1. So I think all that needs to be balanced. But trying to get a schedule that can get something done, hopefully before next summer, would be good. Although not rushing it too much to actually try to get the right solution is obviously of key concern as well. So certainly a challenge to do that, but just some initial feedback there, and we will provide some written comments to that extent. Thanks.
Thanks, Chris. And I definitely agree that track 2, a lot of the topics there will require more thinking on both of our sides, and sitting down and thinking them through. The what we're envisioning today is that track 2 would not be as expedited as track 1. It would follow the cadence of a regular initiative. So you can be assured that we'll, try to get the right answer with the appropriate amount of time and everything for those topics. Thank you. Anyone else?
No one else has their hand raised in the queue, no?
Okay. Well, then let's move forward to the parts of the meeting where other folks will talk, so you don't get bored with me. So now we'll pass it on to Adam, a colleague from the Department of Market Monitoring.
Right. Thank you. Yeah, I appreciate the opportunity today to be here and to share some thoughts on battery BCR issues and recommendations. So I think we'll start off maybe with just a little bit of discussion about the existing CAISO bid cost recovery rules, right? So not necessarily bid cost recovery as a general concept, but just the specific CAISO bid cost recovery rules. As has already, I think, been noted and discussed a little bit, these were really designed for traditional generators, right? So, thermal generators with things like minimum load cost, commitment cost, startup cost, et cetera. And they do not consider battery attributes, right? So they don't consider things like state of charge and other constraints that are associated with or unique to operating a battery. And so when you take these existing rules that were applied for, or rather designed for traditional generators, apply those to storage resources, this can lead to inefficient market outcomes that can also have reliability implications. And it can also lead to inappropriate or unwarranted bid cost recovery payments for storage resources in some circumstances, particularly through the use of outage cards, OMS cards, when limitations that are, again, specific to resources or storage resources are entered into an outage card, but not considered in the way that a traditional generator's outage card might be considered in the BCR rules. And then, all of these potential causes of bid cost recovery for battery resources can be exacerbated by the pending rules for bidding over the soft offer cap, storage resources bidding over the soft offer cap. So a little more on the current BCR rules designed for traditional generators. Apologize for the repetition here with Sergio's presentation, but again, just to highlight that the current rules that the ISO uses, the primary purpose of BCR here is to incentivize efficient bidding by allowing for recovery of discrete commitment costs for traditional generators. So the basic idea here is that you have traditional generators that have things like startup costs, minimum load cost, and there may be scenarios where they are unable to recover their full operating costs through energy market revenues. And so to incentivize efficient three-part bidding, find a cost minimizing solution, this BCR uplift construct facilitates that. However, the concept of commitment that applies to a traditional generator doesn't exist for batteries, right? So there's no commitment for batteries, which means there's no commitment cost for batteries. That is not to say that there is no reason that a battery should ever receive BCR. I think there are possible scenarios where that may be the case, but the key is that the rules that were designed for traditional generators, I think, have revealed that they're not working for batteries, and so you need BCR rules that consider the impact of unique battery operating constraints and characteristics such as state of charge and operator-driven state of charge changes. So as a general rule, the existing bid cost recovery rules allow for consideration of bid cost that result from market dispatch. So this means energy dispatches or commitments that are the result of market instructions and are not the result of outages, re-rates, or self-schedules, things of that nature. And while the basic rule applies to storage as well, there are still a number of ways in which storage resources may experience outage-related or operator-imposed limitations that can still lead to bid cost recovery. So the primary example here being a minimum or maximum state of charge that's entered into an OMS card. This can actually, create a situation where the battery may be re-rated or derated, but is still eligible for BCR. And then also, the BCR rules, again, don't consider constraints unique to storage, such as state of charge. So when, state of charge is impacted earlier in the day, this can lead to situations that, may or may not have been influenced by the operations of the resource or the resource operator's actions that, can limit the operation during the given interval, but maybe directly influenced by bidding and market participation in earlier intervals. So when we look at the drivers of battery BCR, kind of break it down into day ahead and real time. You look at day ahead battery BCR, our analysis of this so far suggests that it's almost exclusively been associated with unanticipated interactions between submitted storage resource parameters and features of the day ahead market optimization. So you can really think of this as, kind of an anomalous outcome, right? Things where I think most participants at the ISO and DMM, we all, might agree that they're not scenarios that BCR would typically be expected to apply. The real-time battery BCR storage is a little bit more complex. It's been almost exclusively driven by resource constraints that are not considered in the current BCR rules. One of the major ones being the ancillary service state of charge constraint, which was addressed in September of 2022. And then the other being state of charge, particularly as it relates to the deliverability or undeliverability of day-ahead schedules, which continues to be the major driver of real-time battery BCR. And so, just to put a little bit of data around those last two statements, we have here an estimate of basically what this metric is. It's how much BCR could you potentially eliminate by excluding intervals, incrementally excluding intervals where certain scenarios apply. It's a difficult thing to estimate because BCR is a daily calculation, and so it's an estimate that's really intended to just provide an order of magnitude. But what you kind of see here on the stacked bar chart, there's a few main categories that we've highlighted. Back in 2022 and maybe halfway through 2023 or so, you see the primary driver is related to the ancillary service state of charge constraint. Any BCR accruing from that cause is subject to rescission after September 20th of 2022. It's indicated by the black line here. But what you notice is that even as the ancillary service state of charge constraint BCR, is resolved, software changes are implemented, that driver goes away. The one that really remains and continues to stand out here is this orange bar at the bottom, which is BCR that accrues when batteries are, unable to deliver their day-ahead schedules because of insufficient state of charge. So you can see that through, the latter part of 2023 and certainly through 2024, this really is the main driver of real-time bid cost recovery for batteries. So to discuss that point a little bit more, it's significant for the dollar amount, but it's also significant because of the implications of this bid cost recovery design for battery resources. So, it creates inefficient outcomes in some circumstances, and it also has reliability implications. So the inefficiency here, the potential inefficiency, comes from the bid cost recovery design removing exposure to real-time prices during hours of day-ahead schedules, which can distort the perceived real-time opportunity cost, intraday opportunity cost of not delivering day-ahead schedules. You can think of a scenario here where a battery, may have a day-ahead schedule over peak net load hours, but maybe because it's eligible for bid cost recovery, if that day-ahead schedule is not deliverable, it doesn't have necessarily the same incentives to reflect that real-time opportunity cost based on expected real-time conditions and expected real-time prices that it might if it were fully exposed to those prices and not eligible for BCR as a result of buying back that day-ahead schedule. We've also, analyzed this a bit, and, it appears there are also other scenarios where the current BCR design can actually incentivize resources because of this fact to obtain incremental real-time market schedules at the expense of day-ahead awards. And so there's a direct reliability implication of this because there's not the same incentive to attempt to preserve state of charge through real-time energy bids, which means that day-ahead schedules during the hours that they may be most needed over the peak hours, may be less likely to be deliverable without manual intervention, and that generally state of charge may not align well with real-time system needs. And so a few recommendations, based on these facts. The first is to consider eliminating day-ahead BCR for battery storage resources. So this, I think, could largely be accomplished just by addressing these sort of anomalous cases that we've seen being the driver of basically all day-ahead BCR for batteries. And then the next piece here would be to consider eliminating most real-time BCR for battery storage resources. So what do we mean by most? I think the idea here is not to, sort of blanket eliminate all real-time BCR for batteries, but rather to start from a position of saying, okay, we're going to eliminate real-time BCR for batteries, but we understand that there may be scenarios where it still could be appropriate for batteries to receive real-time BCR, and then focusing carefully on what those scenarios are and having those be the only remaining scenarios where a battery can receive real-time BCR. So there's a distinction here between, the sort of default position being applying the current rules for bid cost recovery as they were designed for traditional generators and sort of accepting all of the BCR that might come along with that for batteries, versus starting from a position that really tries to rethink BCR in the context of batteries and say, we'll start with nothing and then focus on what those specific cases should be. And then we, would recommend first addressing the real-time BCR from buying back day-ahead schedules, as this is the, the main driver of real-time BCR for batteries, and also has the greatest inefficiency and reliability implications that we've observed so far. And then we also recommend, continuing to closely monitor battery BCR. DMM will continue to do this. We already do this and recommend that the ISO should as well. And of course, any cases that appear to involve intentional manipulation would be subject to FERC referral and investigation. If BCR for batteries were eliminated, in scenarios where the state of charge might not support a day-ahead schedule, this could support efficiency and reliability. We think this could incentivize more accurate estimation of day-ahead bidding parameters, day-ahead scheduling that may be more likely to be feasible in real time. Again, with the understanding that it's not going to be perfect, and there may still be situations where it's appropriate to have some BCR, but just as from a perspective of aligning incentives, we think this would help in that regard. Would also incentivize real-time bids that better reflect intraday opportunity costs that are based on real-time prices and real-time operating conditions. And as such, could better align state of charge in real time with real-time system needs and reduce the dependence on manual intervention there. And then, eliminating BCR associated with OMS limitations on state of charge. This one is a case where, we've used the phrase unwarranted BCR a lot. This is one that I think really fits into that bucket in the sense that other resources that are using OMS cards are not receiving BCR for that. And, it would just be about making it sort of consistent, but in the context of batteries and operating constraints that are specific to batteries. And then kind of the final note here would just be that by, kind of redesigning BCR to explicitly consider the constraints that are applicable to battery resources, this would allow for any additional constraints that may be needed to better model batteries. It would allow for those to be used or included without concern of additional unintended uplift. So we've observed that a lot of the uplift in BCR that's been paid to batteries to date has been the result of interactions between sort of old traditional generator BCR rules being applied to batteries, and by intentionally designing BCR rules for batteries, you could more easily model batteries with their relevant attributes and eliminate some of the concern about creating additional uplift. And with that, I think that that concludes. It's my last slide. So thank you very much. Be happy to take questions.
Kathleen Colbert's hand is up in the queue. Kathleen, your line is unmuted.
Great, thank you. Adam, can you hear me? It's Kathleen Colbert from Vistra.
Yep. Hi, Kathleen.
Hey, and I have a cold, so I apologize in advance, but if you can't hear me, just let me know. Can you go back to slide 8, I think? Perfect. Quick clarifying question, couple. First is, so your recommendations, you're recommending all 3 of these, correct? Rather than
all three of the primary bullets here.
Yes.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay, that's helpful. On the first bullet, you have mentioned that the day-ahead BCR, you perceive that as being driven by anomalies. I hear that as potentially issues with the market optimization itself, frankly. And so I just wanted to kind of lean in on this one a little bit more. I definitely would have to think about whether or not removing BCR makes sense in day ahead. It would be very helpful to have a better sense of what those issues are with the day ahead market, what those anomalies are. And what I mean by that is, are they edge cases or are they market design flaws? Do you see what I'm saying? Like, that's hard for me to parse from what you've presented. And I think that piece is really important for us to understand, because if it's a flaw, we should fix the flaw. But if it's an edge case, then that's something that I'd have to think a lot harder about. Do you have any reaction to that?
Yeah. So I guess I would say it's more of a, the cases that I'm thinking of, it appears to be the result of interactions between parameters that are submitted as part of standard battery operations. So you can think about, the initial state of charge, minimum, maximum SOC, cell schedules, all of these sorts of things. And the way that they are interacting with the day-ahead market optimization in light of, battery operating characteristics such as state of charge, right? So the issue here, again, is that, BCR rules weren't designed with these things in mind. And they are scenarios where, it came up earlier in the call that a lot of the scenarios where BCR is made ineligible is because of things like self-scheduling, right? And I think what we're observing is that many of these cases are effectively forms of self-scheduling, and therefore are likely cases that, may not be appropriate to pay BCR. So it's, I think, largely because it optimizes over a full 24-hour period. There's, I think, a stronger case there to consider eliminating the day-ahead BCR for batteries.
I think what you're putting, thank you, Adam, what you're putting on the table, it seems at least intertwined with what Chris Devon from TerraGen raised earlier, that resonated with me about needing to take that holistic look at BCR for storage, what it means, how we think about it. So I'm optimistic. It sounds like you're thinking in the same direction. Vistra supports that as well. It makes sense to take a beat and look at these things and really talk about what it means. We'll continue to think about it. I just, and characterizing it as maybe even we all need to ask ourselves a question of what is an ISO commitment versus not an ISO commitment for storage, maybe to make it more general. I will take that action item back for my team, and we will do that. In addition, I know there's some other rules that the CAISO and you guys might want to expand on, because it's not just self-schedules, right? We also have min-on time, min-downtime. There's other physical limitations, intertemporal constraints that can drive BCR. Right. What I'm struggling with in my own head is which camp is it fitting in? A non-ISO commitment, or is it an intertemporal constraint? And so I have to think about that a little harder, but I appreciate the discussion. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, Kathleen.
The next question in queue is from Alva. Alva, your line is unmuted.
Yes, thank you, Adam, for your presentation. Would you agree that eliminating day-ahead BCR for battery storage resources wholesale would allow for the case in which a battery would not be able to recover its market charging costs on a day, and that would be considered a legitimate outcome?
Let me make sure I got the question there. So you said, would I agree that by not allowing bid cost recovery in the day ahead, that it could lead to a case where a battery does not recover its charging cost within the day?
Right. Where the total revenues for the day charging, discharge less charging costs. And this could be even over time. I guess that I'm thinking of the standard, actually, a case of a battery that cycles but is unable to recover its charging costs because of what it's paid during the discharge period and what it is required to pay during the charging period. Irrespective of the question of opportunity costs, it's exposed to those charging market costs.
Yeah, so my initial reaction there, and I think what sort of related to the answer to Kathleen is that because the day ahead market optimizes over a 24-hour period, you potentially have an opportunity there to avoid that scenario within a day. If you're talking about potentially over a day, I think the situation becomes a little bit more complicated. I would say, though, that in terms of energy discharge bids, it's worth considering that once the charging has occurred, right? If there is a charging schedule, I guess in my mind it becomes more about okay, that's a sunk cost, right? So it's more about finding the most profit maximizing opportunity to discharge, but yes, I guess I would have to think a little bit more about the potential recovery of charging costs across days.
Well,
within days, though, I think that within days, I think because you're, sorry.
I'm sorry, I don't think you're assured of getting cost recovery. You might in general get cost recovery, but you're not assured of getting cost recovery because bid cost recovery is with respect to the prices that are actually created in the market, which are not necessarily consistent with your schedules or your bids.
Right. No, I understand that. I think because the batteries are optimized over a 24-hour period, though, the scenarios where you would observe that, I would expect them to be considerably less. But if and I don't think that's been a major driver of day ahead BCR that we've observed to date. But if that were a scenario that needed further discussion, I think we'd be happy to have that discussion. But it's not something that appears to be an issue to date, and I would expect the 24-hour optimization to address a large chunk of that.
Yeah, I mean, I would expect that too, but I think your proposal is to eliminate all day ahead BCR. So I'm just questioning whether you've covered the limiting cases that can happen and that can happen in the market, or whether you're just simply solving the problem, which I think you identified quite well in your graph, the problem that exists now, and then potentially creating further problems, down the road.
Yeah, I think to that point, and this again relates to something Kathleen said, I think we would definitely appreciate the more holistic discussion of battery BCR to really sort of flesh out any of these more detailed scenarios or potential complications. The intent here, at least as I'm coming at it, is not to say that we've identified one thing and it's an urgent reaction and we need to take it out. It's really about this basic point that the BCR rules we have now were not designed for batteries, but when you use them with batteries, they have implications that were not anticipated. And so these recommendations are based on our observations to date. And we've been looking at this for several years now, and I feel pretty good that we have a pretty good sample of some of the things, but I think again would appreciate that continued discussion as there's opportunity to do so.
Thanks, Adam.
Next in the queue, we have Renee. Renee, your line is unmuted. You can go ahead.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Good afternoon.
Great. Hi, Renee Steichen with Rev Renewables. And I guess this question is probably both to you and the CAISO, just basic level setting. I don't hear this being changing the BCR rules that were recently made for exceptional dispatch purposes. I just wanted to get confirmation that that is not included in scope here.
I'll respond for DMM and my discussion here. My discussion here does not include the recent BCR revisions specific to battery exceptional dispatch. No.
And I would
Great,
echo
thank
that quickly. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Next in the queue, we have Perry. Perry, your line is unmuted. You can go ahead.
Hey, this is Perry Servideo. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hey, this is Perry Servideo from CSI. Hey, Adam, how are you? I was just like to go back through just a few of these slides just to reprompt my memory here. Can you go to slide 3? Yeah. Okay. So here's where you're talking about the BCR starting from a place of traditional generators and this lumpiness. Can I ask you if you would see a scenario in the day-ahead market in which traditional generator commitment and lumpiness may impact the dispatch and the price for an energy storage resource, if there's a connection between the traditional generator lumpiness and commitment and the prices that are paid to energy storage resources?
Yeah, Perry, I think, just at a high level, the commitment and dispatch of, any other resource can impact price formation for all resources, including storage resources, but I'm not sure I would have much to say beyond that. Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, this kind of gets to the overall theme of what I wanted to say here. So this seems a little bit rushed. Starting from a point of just saying that an energy storage resource isn't a lumpy or discrete commitment and therefore should not get BCR is a little bit quick to trigger, given that it's really the commitment of all resources on the system that impact the prices that a storage resource may incur at its location. But that's the only thing I want to point out here. Understanding that, it'd be good to see a little bit more analysis behind that, and in what instances that we've flagged in some other way that could be the cause, where this could be the cause. And I would think that this gets to what Alvo was saying is, I think that if this is the cause of some of the BCR being incurred in day ahead, I don't see, you could correct me if you do, but I don't see anything really wrong with receiving BCR for this type of thing. Yeah, I don't know if you want to comment on that, but we could go to slide 5.
Yeah, Perry, I'll just say quickly, when in the analysis of day ahead BCR that we've done to date, it really has been sort of focused on these cases that I used the word anomaly in the slide, and it really is cases that it has to do with a variety of parameters that are submitted as part of the day ahead bid or schedule for a battery interacting with the day ahead market in ways that we don't believe were intended based on the VCR design. But it does not appear, and again, I can't say that this has never happened, but I can say from a perspective of having looked at this data for a couple of years now, there does not seem to be a widespread issue that we have observed of, batteries receiving instructions in the day ahead that are, inconsistent with their cost to the level that, they're receiving day ahead BCR for that. So I hear your point about, that other resources could impact the batteries You know, and if that were causing them to be impacted or dispatched in a way that was inconsistent with their bids, that would be worthy of a discussion. But to date, you know, does not appear to be a major driver of day-ahead BCR for batteries.
Yeah, no, I hear you. It just jumped out to me that if the majority of resources on the system and important resources on the system have this lumpiness, that it could be part of the cause. But I hear you on that. Could you, because you mentioned the anomalous conditions sort of word, can we go to slide 5? Yeah, you are talking about anomalies here, and you're sort of beating around it a little bit. Can I ask that when you all analyzed for these anomalies, how did you go about doing that? Did you run a counterfactual market run in order to say that yes, it was due to the specific thing that you were looking for? Because you might have that sort of that thing happening right now that's an analogy. Is like, well, if you only look where the spotlight is shining, you only ever find what's under that light. And I just wanted to be sure that that's not what you're doing here.
Yeah, no, I could appreciate that. I think, you know, there are a number of scenarios we've looked at. Some of them, you know, some of them are cases that, again, I think the best way I can describe them is being sort of analogous to a self-schedule, but through parameters that are unique to batteries. So, you know, without having going into too much detail on some of those, I'll just say that some of them, you know, there's obvious cases where they are linked to the submission of certain parameters, you know, and then there's other cases where you could see, well, you know, because the battery was optimized over a full 24 hours, you know, the cost kind of work out as expected. So, you know, again, it's really based on, you know, the analysis we've done so far, the cases we've seen so far as being the large drivers over, you know, a couple of years now, so a pretty good sample. But, you know, I guess that's my immediate response. But again, you know, if there's more discussion to be had on that, I think, you know, that's something that we would definitely want to be a part of, and hear the cases, you know, if the stakeholder community or the ISO has scenarios where day-ahead BCR, you know, may be warranted, let's have that discussion. But I'm saying that based on the data that we've observed so far, the analysis that we've done so far, it doesn't appear to be the case that would be necessary or expected.
Okay, so can I just summarize? So you did not run a counterfactual to see that the constraint that you were looking at would have an impact that otherwise would not have been incurred by the market?
You mean a counterfactual dispatch of the day-ahead market and comparing, you know, if a parameter had been used in one way versus not?
Yeah, I mean, it'd be terrible to just eliminate BCR and then have the exact same result that you have now, except now you're not paying the BCR that would be due to the energy storage device.
Yeah, I think, Perry, I think the answer to that is that, you know, many of the scenarios, there are scenarios that are within the control of the scheduling coordinator, you know, to prevent those outcomes. So, or, you know, may have been software issues, things of that nature that have since been addressed. So, you know, no, we did not run a full counterfactual of the day-ahead market to compare, but I'll just say that I feel comfortable in the cases that we've looked at that, you know, they were cases that were within the control of the resource operator and would be avoidable.
Right. So if that constraint was not in place, then the prices would have been different.
I mean, potentially, if you know, any resource commitment can impact prices. So it's possible that prices may have been different if the resource had been committed differently. Yes.
Okay, I think that gets back to sort of Alva's point here, is that without really drilling into it, we don't know if you're actually trying to take away revenues that should otherwise be due to to the resources. But you know, and this kind of gets to what's on slide 6. It looks like from the chart on, if you can go to slide 6. So you had this issue with the ASSOC constraint in the past, and then it looks like you're drawing the line where it was apparently fixed, according to the prior slide. But I was wondering here, so it looks like at least recently the ASSOC stuff has come way down. Is that, should I read too much into that, or is that just you know, some kind of seasonality, or I guess seasonality is the wrong word, but does this mean that it's, in my mind, oh, something is fixed, is I'd start to see the impact of it, kind of like a light switch. You turn it on at September 2022, and then it's fixed. So is this something that truly is fixed, or is the ASSOC constraint still causing you know, maybe undue BCR?
No, our understanding is that as of mid-December of 2023, it was implemented. It was fully implemented. So prior to that, there was, you know, a lag between when the FERC order was approved and when the software changes were implemented, and so that's the, you know, the sort of retroactive period here. I will say that, you know, this is data that was not updated. So if you were to run this query again for all of these dates, I would expect to see that during this period, you know, much of the green here would be reduced or eliminated. And I say, you know, I say reduced because this is not the ISO's official settlement estimation of the BCR that's attributable to ASSOC. This is just a, you know, an estimate, sort of order of magnitude type thing that's you know, part of our internal analysis. But in a general sense, yeah, the reason you see it falling off here is it's consistent with our understanding that as of December 23, you know, the software changes to fully implement that were in place.
Gotcha. And then it had what appears to be maybe a little bit of a corresponding increase in the insufficient SOC to meet day-ahead schedules related BCR. So to me, it's kind of a little bit like of a balloon that you're trying to squeeze from both ends here. Although it looks like the overall BCR level has come down. I know 6 months or whatever of data is not enough to draw a conclusion there, but I think what you might be seeing there is an effect of real constraints that systems are occurring in the real-time market that may make them unable to meet those day-ahead schedules, and the interaction of the new ASSOC constraint with that.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I would just say that I don't see the correlation between decreasing this ASSOC and the increase in the SOC to meet day-ahead schedules in 2023 and 24. I think you see it really starting in the middle of 2023 here. You know, you have the pretty stable levels associated with the buyback from day-ahead schedules, even as the ASSOC portion continues to decline. You know, I'm not. Yeah, I appreciate the point that there might be constraints in the real-time market that, you know, could warrant some BCR, and I think that was the point that was acknowledged on the slide. There was to say, you know, it's most, right? And I emphasize the word most to say that start from the perspective of none and be very intentional about the cases that you would consider it.
I would tend to agree with that if we were doing all of that. Are you suggesting we do all of that in the policy space, or like go to FERC and eliminate BCR, then talk about it?
I think, you know, there's probably a role to eliminate a lot of it in the current initiative as proposed, but, you know, certainly the policy space would be the place to have that discussion, you know, of what those particular cases might be. And I think depending on what that discussion looks like, you know, maybe that changes the path. But, you know, at first pass, there is, I think, a need to address this day-ahead buyback issue because there are efficiency and reliability implications with that. And even doing something like, you know, the DEB approach has come up, the BCR based on DEBs. Even if you do that, it doesn't, you know, it reduces the dollars, but it doesn't necessarily change the incentives associated with the current design. So there does seem to be a need maybe for a, you know, a now solution, and then, you know, if there's a longer discussion, okay. But yeah, that's kind of the first reaction there.
Okay, and then can we just look at slide 10? I think we had a few bullets. Yeah, so this significant portion paid to resources, the result of the unintended interactions with the AAS SOC. So I think that's come down. So now it's really, at least now, the interaction between the SOC limitations. Is that what you're getting at in this slide? Just want to make sure I'm tracking between this and the chart.
Yep. No, that's right, Perry. It's just the point that historically the cause has been, you know, battery specific constraints interacting with current BCR rules in a way that I don't think was intentional or contemplated. So just list those as examples. I agree with you that the ongoing case is the SOC limitation.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, I guess I can stop there, but I just wanted to, and I'm sure others have talked about it, but caution on a quick approach, quick fix. We've done that now for years in this space, and it's always led to more problems doing things as Band-Aids. So I would be able to support if we had, you know, much more time to think about this, much more analysis behind it. But if the approach is going to be eliminate and then, you know, and then do all of that other stuff, you're going to have resources that are discriminated against. And you're going to have resources in which they should be due BCR, in which they're not receiving it. So it seems much better path to go about getting it right, even if it takes a longer time to get it right. But I'll leave that there. Thanks for your time, Adam. I appreciate it.
Don't have any further questions in the queue at this point.
Okay, well, thank you. I think that that concludes the DMM presentation. Appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you so much, Adam. Very well. Excellent. So we're back in the other, we are back in the other deck. I wanted to just go over, I think, 2 or 3 slides here to reflect some of the ISO staff's thinking currently on BCR provisions for standalone storage. This had been, you know, informed by our internal conversations, but we are sharing these not as a means to, you know, signal finality of them, but more so to be able to get feedback or the perspective of the community at large regarding how this could work out and what are some of the notions to keep in mind as we move forward in the development of this initiative. So for track 1 that we are focusing on unwarranted BCR for storage, for standalone storage, staff is considering modification that would reclassify energy associated with binding state of charge constraints
as non-optimal due to physical limitations. And this would mean effectively excluding it from BCR settlements. Now, there are a number of binding state of charge constraints that could be applicable. So this is something that we are thinking about and developing and thinking about how it would work out. This is very much aligned with the perspective that Adam just presented of thinking how this relates to how we treat energy that is unavailable due to physical limitations for other resources. But overall, as I said, we are still open to work through these provisions with stakeholders throughout this initiative so that we can fully recognize the unique characteristics of storage. And I think at this time, this is something more so that we'd like to get a reaction on rather than further, discussing or further elaborating on it at this point that we're, here at the initial workshop. For track 2, we do have some other topics. Here, we're not putting forth, just as in the prior slide, we're not putting forth what we think is the only approach, but more so what we have thought of internally. For the BCR relative to collocated resources, some of the challenges that have been identified is how to represent some of the constraints that are unique to collocated resources and consider them for the purposes of BCR, specifically the aggregate capability constraint and the grid charging constraints that many collocated resources out there take advantage of, right? That they use to signal their preference to charge on site. For the energy storage DEB enhancements, we have thought of different ways to enhance the estimation of opportunity costs. One would be to update the reasonable scaler that we use today. So as you all are familiar with, we use 110% reasonableness scaler. And this, has been used in other estimations used by the ISO elsewhere. An idea would be to update it to reflect the difference, the observed difference between day ahead and real-time prices, something that is material for opportunity costs since it's currently based on the fourth highest priced hour of the day ahead. Another means of enhancing this estimation would be to just consider another cost proxy, right? Right now we use the fourth highest hour in the day ahead. There could be other proxies used, for example, the highest day ahead price or other means. This is a conversation that has been had really since the ESDR 4 days, but again, similar to the BCR issues, it took an additional, it became a bit more relevant recently with the changes regarding Order 831. And finally, for track 2, we mentioned before as well the consideration of developing a DEB for hybrid resources. This is quite timely since we've heard from market participants the importance of developing changes similar to what we saw on the modifications relative to Order 831, but that are applicable for hybrid resources. And from staff's perspective, and as it's been discussed previously, the first step to get there for hybrids would be to develop a DEB, since that is really a foundational part of the policy changes that were pursued for with regards to 831. This really is the end, let's say, of the substantial material for today's conversation. So I would invite, stakeholders, if you have questions or comments, to raise your hands relative to these or prior slides, and then we'll move on to our next steps, and we'll basically recap what we've presented previously on the schedule and next important dates. So I'll pause here to see if there's any questions on these 3 slides.
First hand up in the queue is from Perry. Perry, your line is unmuted.
Hey, this is Perry Servideo CISA. Thanks, Sergio. Can you go back to slide 20? And I was hoping that you could just remind me, just on this first point of the reclassifying energy associated with binding storage, how exactly would this be implemented? I mean, it's just one bullet of a proposal here. Are you saying that if it's an interval in which there's some constraint binding, you just say, okay, they're not eligible, or the revenues from that interval do not count in the BCR calculation? Is that how this would, just help me understand how this would work.
Yeah, it basically means that in an interval where there is a binding state of charge constraint, the energy that is associated to the movement in that interval would no longer be classified as optimal energy, but as non-optimal due to physical limitations. So this is a settlements change, and basically what it would encompass, and I welcome anyone that is on the call from the ISO staff to correct me as well. What it would mean is that this energy is no longer included in the BCR settlement, and it would be, counted elsewhere as non-optimal energy. So optimal energy means that it is, part of the subset of all the energy within the day that would be included in the BCR settlement. This means basically that the mechanics of bids, dispatch, that would not be affected. This is a settlements change in particular.
Right.
The difference, sorry?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, and you're just saying that a certain interval would get sort of classified as a non-BCR interval or something like that in settlement.
A certain energy in that interval, in an interval or a number of intervals, would be reclassified as non-optimal. Yes.
And would this include, I mean, you're saying that it would, I think you used the word a binding SOC constraint. Are you talking about even a how to say this, even constraints that have not been directly submitted by market participants? So for instance, there is the SOC constraint in the CAISO's optimization, which includes a lot more fluff now from stuff that CAISO has added to it. And I just want to, are you saying just if the SOC constraint is binding, then all of a sudden they'd be excluded from BCR in that interval?
Well, I would say that the word that we've phrased it here is definitely with the intent also to welcome this type of discussion within our comments as well. The reasoning behind this idea too is that it wouldn't directly modify other, parts of the interaction between market participants and the market than settlements, right? So that is part of it. Further understanding what are the specific state of charge constraints and how to identify if any exceptions to that could help would also be part of this policy discussion. And I do see a message from James Lynn. If we could unmute his line, he'd like to chime in as well. Yeah.
Hey, James, if you can press the raise hand icon, it's at the bottom of your participants panel.
I think he said he couldn't, but let me try and see that.
Okay, I've unmuted James Lynn's line.
Hi, sorry, I was trying to raise it, it wasn't letting me. So, can you hear me, Sergio?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah. So Perry, a good way of looking at it is if you had an outage and your energy was redispatched because of the outage, that portion of the redispatch would be classified as D-rate energy. What we're saying is instead of allowing this energy, which is not going to be available because of the SOC constraint, that we reclassify it. Right now it's being classified as optimal energy. We're going to reclassify it as something other than optimal energy, which is not considered for BCR. That means it's just that energy. It's not that interval. It means just that energy's revenue and costs are not considered in BCR.
So this could occur, I'm just trying to understand that we are talking about the individual NGR's SOC constraint. And just in the instance in which it would be binding, you'll know the energy amount that will cause, say, a redispatch or a dispatch of another resource that was because the optimization wanted to save some energy on the NGR?
No, not another resource. It's a redispatch of that resource because it cannot provide that energy.
So this gets a little bit more complicated, I think, as I think it through with the multi-interval optimization. I assume here now we're kind of zeroing in on talking about real time, although I'd be interested to talk about day ahead later. But in real time, you know, that SOC constraint is managing these resources to save charge for later in the, say, 65 minutes that it's looking ahead, in some intervals where it's looking ahead that far. So, you know, to me, that's an optimal result, is to say, you know, it's not just that, oh crap, I'm out of SOC right now. That's not the way the real-time market works. It's looking ahead and say, you know, it's not that I'm out of SOC now, but if I spend, you know, if I discharge now, I would be foregoing an opportunity later. And I understand, Sergio, you're saying you're not saying we're going to mess with that interaction and that dispatch and those prices, but I do hear that what you're saying is that that's an optimal outcome. That's an efficient outcome for the market to want to save that storage for later. But what you're saying is you would consider that not optimal and therefore should not be given BCR, if I'm understanding it right.
So it's not that we can't, it's not that we can dispatch it. It's because of where it's binding, it cannot be dispatched. Meaning that day ahead, you had put it in a position that you were, let's say you were supposed to charge, and now we get into real time, and if we maintain the day ahead, we would look to you to charge, but because you don't have enough available capacity to charge, we have to give you a redispatch around that day ahead position. And therefore, that portion would be considered unoptimal.
So it sounds there like we're talking about a different constraint, not just the SOC constraint that manages the charge in the NGR. You're talking about some other submitted constraint. Am I hearing that right? I just need to know which constraint we're talking about here in this. It
is the SOC constraint, which tells you how much capacity you have to charge or discharge. And what it's saying is, and we're saying, Barry, is if that constraint shows that your day ahead position was not able to be delivered, then that portion of the energy is just like having an outage. It's like saying I should be able to give a gas generator. I had a 200 megawatt award from day ahead, Now I've come in and I've derated my Pmax to 150. I have 50 megawatts that Day Ahead committed me to that I can't deliver anymore. And therefore, you shouldn't be classifying that 50 megawatts as optimal energy in real time. And that's what this is being very similar to.
Okay, I think I understand now. It's good to get the clarification that it would be based on just the regular old SOC constraint being binding. I guess my next question, thanks for that, James. I really appreciate you coming on and explaining that. My next question, and James, you could take this, or Sergio, just can one of you talk about, at least today, if you have a constraint like the end of hour SOC or these other, or the AS SOC constraint, how is the BCR handled in the intervals in which those are binding today?
So I can quickly speak to this. For both of those constraints, there is already tariff language that describes the applicable, the intervals where BCR would not be applicable. So for example, for the end of hour state of charge constraint, it's 2 hours prior to the operating hour that BCR is, the asset is uneligible for BCR in those hours. For the ASSOC constraint, it's when, if the market requires to dispatch the assets in a manner that would be uneconomic to meet that those awards, then that is also excluded. For those two examples, there is tariff language. Part of the issue here too is that for a vast array of circumstances, there is no specific language on this, and we are thus, just using BCR as we would with a conventional resource. So that is definitely part of the challenge. Yeah.
Yeah, if those two situations have already been contemplated and handled, what I'm struggling to figure out then is what the issue is with the optimal use of the SOC constraint, unless it's due to some of the other fluff that CAISO's just added into that constraint. I'm struggling to figure out what's not optimal about that constraint holding back a resource for an opportunity to tackle CAISO's more pressing needs later in the 65 minutes that it's looking ahead. And, I know I'm just kind of playing with the words here, but you guys brought it up. You're talking about reclassifying that as a non-optimal, and therefore it would exclude it from BCR. I'm still, in order to do that in my head, I'm thinking, what's not optimal about that?
Well, these two circumstances are that we've talked about, the ASOC and the end of hour state of charge, are quite specific. The ASOC is just looking when ancillary service awards are the binding costs. That's one of the issues. For the end of hour state of charge, that is a biddable parameter that is decided by the market participant that might want to get certainty of getting to a specific state of charge. Other circumstances that can drive this really are a manner of how bidding occurs. After after a day-ahead schedule is given to an asset, it does have the incentive to bid in a way that would not guarantee being able to meet that schedule, and that is the part that is generally problematic, more general problematic than just the AS or end of hour circumstances.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks for that, Sergio. I just am left with kind of one recommendation takeaway, at least as it goes with this track one. And that is, given that the trigger for the BCR will be based on a binding SOC constraint, which is like the lifeblood of the NGR model, it seems to me that CAISO should pay particular attention to what aspects of things that are going on in the real-time market are due to the SC's actions or submittals versus CAISO's optimization or CAISO's interference in that SOC. And if we can untangle those two things, I think you can bring a lot of people along on any needed BCR changes.
Yeah, thank you for that comment, Barry. And I think that work of entanglement will be glad to see some of your perspectives in comments as we move through the initiative.
All right, thanks.
The next person in queue is, sorry?
Yeah, I just wanted to say, I'm not sure if another colleague of mine wanted to speak further, but Tyler, if you want to speak, just let me know and we'll try to get you unmuted. But go on, thank you.
The next question we have in queue is from Alva. Alva, your line is unmuted. You can go ahead.
Thank you. On track one, just to follow up on, Perry went through some of the complexities with real time, but are you proposing that track one would apply to day ahead?
At this point, we are not closing the door of discussing day ahead within track one. As you can see, the majority of the conversation has been around real time, but we do not want to preclude conversation of day ahead following comments and what we see from the stakeholder community. Yeah.
So you'd potentially disallow all bid cost recovery from an hour where the resource hit the state of charge limit. If the full flexibility of the battery were being bid in, which ideally is what you want, then almost any solution, any market solution is going to use the capacity of the battery. So you're essentially going to be optimizing and then removing from eligibility for bid cost recovery those hours where a constraint is hit that is naturally going to be hit by the optimization. I find that, I think I can see more of a rationale on the real-time side. As James presented it, it's sort of like a direct way to address the issue that the DMM was seeing. But when you start talking about doing this in the day-ahead market, you really have no basis for it, I don't think, because the constraint is just naturally going to be hit in the optimization in order to fully utilize the battery. Whatever constraint can be hit is going to be hit. Otherwise, if there's sufficient value in the battery, and what you're actually asking for, or you're looking for from participants who don't want to lose bid cost recovery, is to figure out ways to restrict the ISO from taking them to their limits, which I think will lead to much less optimal solutions than the ones that you're even concerned with now. So I would strongly suggest that you not extend the scope of this to day ahead, despite the statement on DMM's part that they'd like to disallow all BCR on the day ahead side. I think it's central that for batteries to be able to bid and expect that their bids will be respected over the course of the day. Otherwise, they have no idea how to actually, essentially bid into the market in a reliable way. They don't know that they're going to receive what they're asking for. Either they're going to pay for what they're charging at the level they want to pay, that they're going to be discharged at the level they want to be paid for, or that they're going to be, essentially removed from, that revenues are going to be removed from their ability to recover them because of these kinds of constraints.
Yeah, thank you for that, Alva. And I would say, we are not eliminating that from the conversation here precisely to get this type of feedback. We are aware, for example, looking at the information provided by DMM, that real time seems to be, a larger share of the concern as well. So while we don't want to preclude discussion of day-ahead BCR as part of the initiative, we also want to have this type of feedback to figure out how we can get focused and we can meet this initiative schedule. So thank you, Alva.
Thanks, Sergio.
Next in the queue, we have Kathleen Colbert. Kathleen, your line is unmuted.
Thank you. This is Kathleen Colbert from Vistra. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thanks so much. I think, you know, I appreciate you asking for a little bit of feedback and reaction. At the highest level, my reaction is that this is not something that should be, track one is not something that should be fast-tracked. What you're putting forward is quite complex, as I think has been demonstrated by the discussion today. It's also a problem statement. And so I share this other lens of, it's a problem statement that's incredibly compelling. So if bid cost recovery is being provided to resources in instances that you would look at it as equivalent to a self-commitment or a non-ISO commitment, that is very concerning. And so I want to provide that response to the CAISO so that you know that, you know, that is a compelling problem statement. I also heard in some of my other colleagues who kind of commented, you know, as long as we take the time, understand this problem, understand what parts of the market and that we're really worried about leading to these, driving these inefficient BCR payments that you're identifying, we can all move towards a solution that I think we can be comfortable with. But we do need to take the time. So at the highest level, Sergio, my feedback for the CAISO is, please don't rush this and give us the chance to come along with you and understand what the problem is and what the solution is. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I appreciate your comment, Kathleen. And part of the comments that we're seeking for today's workshop has to do with the schedule as well. So representing that in your written comments will be of great help. Overall, I would say that the schedule, the timing of track one, as we're thinking about it, is mainly driven by the sensitive nature of the topic. That's one part, and also by the fact that the ISO has committed to work on these issues for a while, and other very pressing matters made it so that, you know, we're getting to this topic at this time. So in that context, you know, I can share that we'll appreciate your feedback on the schedule. If you look back, let me try and get there. Okay, I overshot it. If you look back at slide 18, there's, you know, quite a couple of weeks, maybe 2 or 3 weeks between the final comments and the Board of Governors meeting. So we also think, like, you know, we want to stick to this timeline, of course, but to the degree that as we are discussing these topics, we find that perhaps another meeting is needed or something like that, we will seek to accommodate it. I do want to note that, you know, we've made a commitment to the Board of Governors and the governing body and to FERC as well to address this previously. So that's really what's guiding the issue here, the timeline of the issue here. But, you know, we see the value of discussing this publicly and of having all of this conversation with stakeholders. So I take that, I'll take that back and think about it further. Just want to underscore, you know, our point of view as well. Thank you.
That makes a lot of sense, and I understand where you're coming from. I do think you need something in between a straw proposal and this call. So before I get off the mic, I just wanted to highlight, I have heard quite a bit of confusion today. You've provided some information. I thank you for that. One of the pieces of confusion that I have been hearing is we're talking a lot about constraints, but then in the other moment, and most of the DMM presentation and most of your beginning presentation alluded to strategic bidding behavior. So I'm hearing two things. I'm hearing strategic bidding behavior using storage bidding parameters that are unique to storage is causing BCR challenges. And then in other instances in your bullet point, I only see the word stated charge constraint. And so that is confusing to me, and I think we need to parse out, are we talking about the market solutions in an earlier market run have put you in a position by which the next market run's stated AS stated charge constraint or end of horizon stated charge constraint is binding? That's the one constraint I didn't hear you mention. You mentioned the AS stated charge constraint. You didn't mention the end of horizon, but you did mention the end of hour, which is actually a bidding parameter. So I'm feeling like we need to be more crisp, and maybe we just need one more call with some examples, writing all this stuff out so we can bring the community together. And like Dawn suggested, a BCR numerical example will really help as well. So that's my suggestion. Thanks for you.
Yeah, thanks for the suggestion, Kathleen. I would, however, like to clarify a couple things quickly. So first, I would say that the constraints that I mentioned before are not the constraints that I mentioned before, meaning the ASOC constraint, the end of hour SOC constraint. Those we have thought them out, and we have there are already provisions related to BCR for those constraints. What we're thinking about here is more so like when you cannot, your state of charge makes it so and a day ahead energy schedule cannot be supported, right? The way that you get there can be through bidding behavior. So all of those things are not identical. They have their own specific importance in the conversation, right? We brought up ASSOC and end of hour as examples, an end of hour state of charge constraint, as examples of constraints that already have a form of BCR consequence or specific provision that we've applied and that is in the text. Now, how can you get to another scenario where your SOC cannot support a day ahead schedule? There are many ways to get there, as some of the callers have noted. No, some could be through the bidding behavior. Others could be through the way that other parts of the market interact. So I just want to clarify that these are distinct. Yeah.
And I do think I got a little confused, and so maybe next time, just we'll keep that in mind and make it crisper on both sides of the mic. What you just penciled out, Sergio, was so elegant, because that is where I think we need to move this discussion, is that there are really two different potential categories. Bidding behavior, whether it's a bidding parameter or bidding prices, that is driving an outcome where the stated charge is not there, versus market solutions that were optimal in a prior market run that has put you in a situation. As you know, Adam and I were kind of talking a little bit about CAISO as a concept of ISO commitment versus a non-ISO commitment. A non-ISO commitment we often think of as self-scheduled. That's the high-level policy that we need to take a step back and figure out what that means for storage. And like I said, it's a compelling problem statement, so we are going to work with you on that problem statement. But my gut reaction is I can get on board with bidding behavior is a non-ISO commitment, but I'm going to really struggle with agreeing that the market solution in a prior market run is not an ISO commitment decision, right? So from an analogous perspective, I don't think the words you have here, it's very finite. if the binding stated charge constraint, then it's not eligible for BCR. We need to add another layer of, is it binding stated charge constraint due to bidding behavior or not? And I think that's going to be the next layer we have to work on. But if it's just a standard, if a stated charge constraint was binding, make them ineligible, that does not sound just and reasonable on its face to me. So I'm committed to working with you on this. I want you to hear that at my highest level, but that's my gut reaction. Thank you.
Thanks, Kathleen.
Chris Devon is next up in the queue. Chris, your line is unmuted.
There, Chris Devon with Terragen. Again, can you hear me all right?
Yes.
Thanks, Sergio. So I just wanted to comment, concur with, I think, about everything that Kathleen just mentioned as well. I think we would agree with, and I just wanted to maybe kind of explore the idea of kind of the schedule here and the quick nature of this again, and just mention that, you know, on this track one piece, it seems pretty apparent, at least the initial intent here, and from these slides and the DMM slides would be to, you know, look at removing eligibility for BCR from storage and more in general, and so I think, you know, those were very apt comments by Kathleen about the points where it's not just bidding behavior that can cause the need for these uplifts. So I would agree with that, and I think I would just say, given the rush nature of this, it's very concerning where potentially we would be giving up, you know, payments for uplift that really should actually still be appropriate in some cases, which kind of goes back to my earlier comments during the meeting about the need to just talk more holistically on the intent of BCR for storage, since it was never really at the outset of the development of BCR, and all of those prior statements that CAISO's made to FERC has never really had any discussion with stakeholders or storage asset owners about the need for certain types of uplift for certain uneconomic outcomes that really are optimal and are, you know, more appropriate than not appropriate, and not intentional bidding behavior manipulation. So I think in that sense, it seems that we would be giving up potentially some of the appropriate uplift by doing some of these solutions. And it seems that CAISO has a pattern that's pretty concerning, in that it's always doing proposals for storage that seem to tamp down on the ability for storage to, you know, consistently maintain their financial revenues, and being more worried about the reliability and manipulation than the actual total efficient outcomes of these settlements and the participation in the market. So we would potentially be giving up that BCR under these proposals, and then we have really no certainty as to any of these other more holistic solutions that would actually fix some of the things that are maybe appropriate, like these other uplifts that were mentioned, potentially some other different forms, maybe outside of BCR entirely, but still potentially appropriate. So, you know, how long would we really be having to wait for those other solutions, given the fact that we would, you know, move quickly on this and then have no true commitment to, you know, resolving those other solutions? I mean, CAISO has had storage enhancements on their roadmap for years now, revisiting it again, and it's continually de-scoped and pushed back towards those more command and control outcomes about reliability, and not really fixing some of these market efficiency outcomes. So, you know, I just wanted to express some of those additional themes of concern around just the entire efforts towards storage. It seems like CAISO should really try to fix both things at the same time, or commit to some kind of a timeline schedule to, you know, replacing some of those lost revenues that actually really should be appropriate uplift, potentially, and then talk through those and have that discussion as part of this track one effort. So just a couple other thoughts I wanted to leave you with there. I think I'll stop at that. Thank you.
Thanks, Chris. And I would just note, to the degree that you think that particular scenarios, circumstances should not be, excluded from BCR settlement, that's part of what we want to. This is the venue to convey that. Given that, as it's stated here, we really are trying to develop a robust set of provisions of BCR that recognize the unique characteristics of storage. So to the degree that you can come up with that feedback, or scenarios or cases in your comments, that would be greatly useful. And thanks for the feedback. Yeah.
All right, any further questions in the queue at this time? One hand actually just went up from Michael Volpe. Michael, your line is unmuted. You can go ahead.
Hi, Sergio. This is Michael Volpe from PG&E. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. I have two questions. One was just do you think if the real-time market was extended beyond 1 or 2 hours that this wouldn't be an issue, these state of charge concerns? I feel like one piece that was missing from the conversation today was the limited nature of the real-time market horizon. And
I think, go ahead, sorry.
And yeah, my second question is related to the track 2 items that you presented, if you prioritize them in any way.
Yeah, great questions. So regarding the first one, I can see an argument be made that a longer look ahead in real time could mitigate some concerns. But I can also see the argument noting that it would create new concerns or exacerbate some of them, of the ones that market participants have highlighted regarding multi-interval optimization in general. So, that's something to consider, right? It would be a complex modification, and it also brings up other challenges. So that's something to consider with that solution. And then at this time, regarding the track 2 topics, and I'll go back to the slide that has it all together right here, slide 16. So at this time, we don't have like a clear prioritization of these topics. We're thinking of working through them in track 2 after the completion of track 1. And one of the questions out there in the comment template is if you have any feedback on how to prioritize them and why. So we welcome the perspective of stakeholders there. Yeah.
Thanks. And I just want to bring up the recent price formation enhancements, this soft offer cap kind of recommendation that the DEB be relooked at for storage to include intraday opportunity costs that vary by hour potentially. So the second item you have for opportunity costs for DEBs is, I wanted to confirm that would include something like that proposal.
I would say that discussion of price formation will inform this piece. Some of the ideas we put here, as you'll see, so some of the ideas we put here are a little bit more focused on the opportunity cost approximation rather than, or estimation, rather than reflecting how that opportunity cost varies across the day. So for example, I know that in price formation, there was some discussion of hourly DEBs or something like that. after we see the comments and we get the stakeholders' perspective on priorities and the topics, we might see more alignment there, or consider keeping some of the discussions in PFE, and we'll provide more clarity on that as we get more feedback on track 2 here as well.
Thanks. Yeah, it would make sense in my mind to bundle that conversation if we are going to change the DEB. But yeah, thanks for responding.
Yeah, thanks, Michael, and be sure to let us know of that in your comments for sure, because we'll take that into account as we plan out. So thank you.
Okay, there are no further questions in the queue at this time.
Okay, so just before I pass it on to Brenda for next steps, I just want to recap a couple of things that I heard from the comments. One would be, it would be useful to have more discussion before a paper. And another one I heard would be, it would be useful to perhaps have a bit more time, particularly with this first comment. I cannot at this time commit to anything on the first one of more discussion before a paper, but I can say that we can leave open our comments beyond the 11th. So, you know, ideally, all stakeholders that do have comments on today's meeting and the materials that were posted last week can submit it by the 11th. If you cannot, if you would like to submit a bit later, we can keep that open, but we do urge folks to, you know, provide their feedback as soon as possible so that we can reflect that in our future materials. And on the ask to have a bit more discussion before a paper, we'll think about it, and if there's any changes, we'll notify you. But at this time, let's keep moving forward with the schedule as outlined in these slides. So with that, I'll pass it on to Brenda, but thank you all for joining and for your perspective, and I look forward to engaging with you in this process.
Thank you, Sergio. We appreciate it. And I went ahead and sent out the link on the chat for those who want to follow us on those presentations that were posted, as well as the updated timeline there. The next steps are that the comments for this workshop are due by end of day, July 11th, with the comment that Sergio just provided. As well, the upcoming milestones include the posting of the Track 1 draft proposal for the 17th, followed by the stakeholder call on the 22nd. As well, we will be sending out a notice with those announcements if they are confirmed, but make sure to keep an eye out as we update the website for the initiative in terms of any related documentations. As well, for this meeting, we appreciate any questions. Feel free to send them over to ISO@CAISO.com. We will be posting this recording as soon as we can. This will be expedited recording, so we will hopefully get this posted within the next 2 days. So that would help out for those who weren't able to participate or would like to see it before submitting comments on the loan. So other than that, the last few announcements we have is the Stakeholder Symposium that's held this year on October 29th with the welcome reception, followed by the Stakeholder Symposium program, October 30th. We do have a great amount of people that just registered the past few weeks, so we look forward to seeing more those who are interested. Sponsorship opportunities are available. Feel free to send us an email so we can give you that discount code included with the sponsorship package with an amount of registered attendees for that package, so we'll get that to you. But other than that, all the questions, you'll see those on the eventmobi.com/2024 Stakeholder Symposium for any questions for FAQs, agenda, as well registering and also modify your registration. But we'll do our best as well. We get registration up and climbing. That's the last announcement I have for today. And I would like to thank my event producer, Silas, for helping us out today. And we hope to see you very soon. And we thanks everyone for your patience. And we hope you have a good day. Thanks, everyone. Silas, you can go ahead and close our call.
Thank you to all of our speakers, and thank you all in the audience for joining us today. With that, the call is concluded, and you may now disconnect.